pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dreams some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we enjoy in this country, welcome to another edition of Character Matters with Dr. George Simon. I welcome you to join the discussion at 718-717-8296. We're going to be talking about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the interrelationship between freedom and character, and the character crisis that we face in this country. We have so many great examples in just the last week to discuss. Today we're going to be talking about the horrible tragedy that occurred at the UC Santa Barbara campus, near that campus last week. And we're also going to be talking about the VA scandal and a few other things that simply underscore what I have been stressing in all my work over the past 25 years, and on my blog at www.manipulative-people.com, and on my website, www.drgeorgesimon.com, and also the other blog that I write for, www.counselingwith2lsresource.com. And in my books, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, the international bestseller in sheep's clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, and my book for the Christian audience, The Judas Syndrome, from Abingdon Press. We'll be discussing those issues tonight, and boy, we've got a really heavy agenda for tonight. And I invite you to chime in with your own thoughts and to ask any questions that you might have at 718-717-8296. Well, it seems like hardly a week goes by where we don't have another glaring example of the kind of crisis that we face in our country, especially when it comes to character matters. And that's why I titled this program Character Matters. It matters more than anything. You cannot find a problem that we have in this country. I'll repeat that. I dare you to find a problem that we really have in this country that doesn't stem directly from the character issues that we face. I'll say that again. I know it might strike some people as incorrect, and it may rub some people the wrong way, and folks might take issue with it. But I'll assert this one more time. We have the greatest, freest country on earth, and because of the freedoms that we enjoy, we have the opportunities that most folks don't enjoy to prosper. But our prosperity and our freedom directly hinge on the character of our people, on people's willingness to fulfill their obligations, not just to themselves, but to others. That's what makes it all work. And there are plenty of individuals, unfortunately, in our country who struggle with character disturbances of some type and victimize the rest of us. Some of those character disturbances are fairly voluntary, which means that the people who have the character impairments just don't care. I say in my workshops all the time, I use little rhyming phrases to help people understand the problems of our time. I say, they see, they disagree. What I mean by that is, they know the issues that many people take with them with respect to their character, the ways they look at the world, the ways they think about things, the manner in which they behave. They see, but they disagree with the basic norms of human decency. So there are those types. Then there are also those types who are influenced in their character disturbance by some factors outside of their ability to fully control, such as mental disease or defect. And we have, unfortunately, for both of those reasons, an explosion of character disturbance in this country, and it is literally bringing us to our knees. It is literally killing us. It is costing us, believe me, it is costing us plenty. It is costing us in lost productivity. It is costing us in every way imaginable, from the difficulties with which we treat ourselves, to the frivolous ways that we harm ourselves, to the ways that our families don't hang together, they fall apart, and the rest of us, those who are willing to shoulder any kind of responsibility, are left to pick up the pieces. Those of us who are willing to shoulder the burdens and to exercise some degree of responsibility are left to pay all the bills. This is a situation that cannot stand. I want to point first to this VA scandal that's been going on. You know, this problem with the VA, actually, and it's a perfect example of what happens with big government. It is a perfect example. Because with big government, you know, I kind of have a personal model. I am, politically speaking, rigorously and fiercely independent. I'll make that confession to you all right now. I think that both extreme ends of the political spectrum are both misguided and a little bit nuts. I find many issues to take with those who proclaim themselves conservative, and I take issue with many other things that people promote who call themselves liberals. So I am fiercely independent. I want to judge policies on their merits, and most especially on their proven outcome. In other words, do they work? For example, it was more than 40 years ago that we supposedly declared war on poverty. We were going to eradicate it. Hundreds of billions of dollars later, and almost as many programs as you could possibly count, federal, state, and local programs. Where are we with that war on poverty? Where are we? Well, some people will say, well, at least people aren't starving. People are still starving. Well, we have food stamps. People are still starving. I don't think we've been honest with ourselves about why that's the case. There are so many failed policies because, and I know that some folks might get offended by this, the reason we have failed policies is not because they're poorly intended. I don't think there's any ill intention out there. Well, I'll take that back. I think there is some ill intention on some people's part. I think some people, some of our public officials, pander for the sole purpose of garnering votes and hanging on to power. And they conceive these ideas primarily for the purpose of soliciting votes and building a base to secure power for their political party and ideology. I do think that some people do that. And all I have to say to that is shame, shame, shame on them. Despicable characters. But I think that many others are actually well-intentioned. But here's where the problem comes in. They're not honest about the fruits of their proposals and the outcomes of their programs. And if they were to do an honest assessment of whether or not these costly endeavors are paying off, we wouldn't be in such a huge financial hole. But honesty is a matter of character. And so I will repeat, you can't find a problem that we have, political, social, economic. You can't, I dare you to find a problem that we have that isn't directly related to the character crisis we face. And so, that's been my life's work. I have spent my professional life trying to educate people about the major disturbances of character and working with people to help develop character. In my practice as a helping professional, I have seen individuals with all sorts of problems. Some individuals truly have had no problems other than through no fault of their own, their brain chemistry went haywire. There are such individuals. They didn't ask for their problems. They just simply came upon them because something went screwy in the biochemistry. So it's truly not their fault, and they need nothing but proper assessment and assistance to get that biochemistry rebalanced. But I have also seen and witnessed personally the greater majority of individuals who come either on their own or more commonly are pressured into coming by others for help, whose problems stem directly from the way they approach life, from the way they tend to think about things, from the attitudes they hold, from the values they have or lack thereof, and the behaviors, the irresponsible behaviors that have become habits of theirs. In other words, the problem is their character. They haven't grown up. And so my work as a helping professional, which, by the way, I was never trained to do, no one in the mental health professions is trained to raise an individual. That's supposed to be the job of parents. Parents who many times these days, unfortunately, neglect their responsibilities. So that's supposed to be the job of parents, and then reinforced in our social institutions many of which, unfortunately, are crumbling before our very eyes. This shapes character. And mental health professionals are generally not trained to raise people, to help them grow into mature, responsible adults. But that's what we largely do these days. And so along the way, I learned some very important lessons, and I felt an obligation to share what I had learned. So, a while back, in 1996 at first, I wrote my first book, In Sheep's Clothing. Oh, actually, I wrote it in 1995. It was finished in 1995, and I sold In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People at workshops that I was doing around the country in a spiral-bound fashion. It was just a compendium of most of my material that I presented at workshops. Then I cleaned it up a bit and re-edited it and sent a draft of it to a New York publisher, a New York book developer who shopped it around to various publishers. And the consensus in New York was not only that it was good material, but they wanted me to jazz it up and make it more popish, if that's even a word. There were a lot of self-help pop psychology books at the time. I didn't think that highly of many of them, but they got the public's attention, and, publishers, they're in the business of selling books. Well, the kind of product they wanted me to produce was not the kind of product that I had in mind. I wanted a substantive book that told the whole story and didn't do it in a jazzy kind of way, but in a meaty way that would give the average person a really firm understanding of the nature of today's problems and how to go about solving them. And especially I wanted to give the victims of manipulative people a real glimpse into the true character of those folks that are the archetypal wolves in sheep's clothing. I wanted to give them the tools that they needed to not only recognize who these folks were, and especially the tactics these folks use to try and manipulate and control and manage the impressions of others, but also to give them the tools to deal more effectively with these kinds of people and protect themselves from being victimized. So, after I couldn't reach agreement with any of the major houses about the kind of book that I wanted, and after they told me that the kind of book that I wanted to put out there wasn't going to sell very well, I decided to publish it myself, independently, in 1996. And they were partly right there in New York because the book did not set immediate sales records, but one by one, reader by reader, slowly but surely over time, through the best advertising you can possibly have, which is word of mouth, the book became a bestseller. So much so that when the time came for a revised edition of the book and for other works, when I approached an independent, smaller publisher, a royalty publisher, they were more than interested in sheep's clothing, and they were more than interested in negotiating foreign rights and for several languages and foreign publications, with all the many reviews, I think 350 some plus reviews on Amazon and on some of the other online booksellers, In Sheep's Clothing became a phenomenon. And I am deeply grateful for that. But I'm also aware, and believe me, I'm not trying here to just brag, but I know in my heart that if I hadn't been true to my principles, I would have had perhaps a popular seller that would have gotten interest. Maybe I'd have gotten on more talk shows. I got on a few a few high-profile programs that helped sell the book. But if I had written the book that they wanted me to write, which was not of substance, and I had betrayed my own character, if I had shown myself to be less than the person that I strive to be, then it might have been one of those flash-in-the-pan things that sold fairly well, made me some money, made my publisher even more money, but it wouldn't have served its purpose. And it wouldn't have brought so many people the kinds of insight and tools that they needed to deal with difficult circumstances. So I am happy, and I can live with myself that by doing the right thing has happened, and good things continue to happen. My blog at www.manipulative-people.com, it continues to grow exponentially every single week. And I am extremely grateful to the contributors to that blog. I have a virtual army out there of well-informed and equally well-intentioned commentators who post comments on my articles and who dialogue with one another and who share a wealth of personal experience and knowledge, by the way, that has helped literally hundreds of thousands of people deal with difficult circumstances. I couldn't be prouder. I especially couldn't be prouder of those individuals who have made the enterprise what it is. So it's not just my work. It's the work of all those who have respected the work and have contributed so immensely. And I am so grateful. I have so much to be grateful for. I'll share another little thing with you. I unfortunately have, in the last 5 years or so, just recovered. I've been in recovery from some very serious medical issues, a couple of which really put the kibosh to my ability to practice, to do workshops, to basically earn the living that I was making as a mental health professional for so many years. And if it weren't for robust book sales, continuing year after year, only getting better year after year, I might not have even survived. Now, by the grace of God and some very excellent medical care, I'm quite out of the woods in comparison to where I was. I still have some difficulties with my voice, although today is a pretty good day, and maybe you don't even notice it. At least I'm hoping so. But I nearly lost my voice as the result of undetected, what we call silent esophageal reflux disease, where gases rising in my esophagus that I did not feel, so I didn't know were doing damage, were slowly and steadily eroding my vocal cords. So I'm grateful to even have my voice, to be able to reach you and to talk about these things that matter. I'm grateful for so much. But I also know that if I had betrayed myself, I would not be here today and I wouldn't be talking to you. Character matters. And I'm not just blowing my own horn here. It matters for everybody. And believe me, I am not saying that I'm without my flaws. You can just, anybody wants can email my wife or talk to her, and she'll give you a long laundry list of the flaws that I still have. I'm very well aware that I still have a long way to go. But character matters. It matters that we size ourselves up and that we know what we're dealing with, where our strengths and where our weaknesses are, where our hang-ups are and where our character defects are, and that we do something about it for our own good and for the good of this great society that we live in. Because as a country, we're only great and we can remain free when our people are of sound character. Now let me get back to this VA scandal. There have been problems in the Veterans Administration, not for just the last few months, not for just the last year, but for the last 25 years. And those problems have been very well known. On top of that, because of the sentiment, the well-intended and good sentiment most of our lawmakers have for our veterans and for their care, the Veterans Administration is one of those government entities that has gotten every single penny that they have asked for, in good times as well as bad. Why? Because we don't want to cheat those people that have put their lives on the line to protect and defend our freedoms. Some have paid the ultimate price. And in these days of improvised explosive devices, landmines, and everything else, those who survived, in many cases, are dealing with injuries on a scale that we simply couldn't even imagine years ago. We have so many people. You know, long ago with these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we stopped giving statistics. We stopped counting. And for a while there, we weren't counting, but only the deaths. We were not talking about all the seriously wounded and maimed. And, we had such good intentions. We really wanted to make sure that when it came to their health care, they had everything they needed. Well, unfortunately for us, there is a character crisis within the administration of the VA. From those bureaucrats that operate it to those medical personnel that staff it. And how it showed itself this most recent scandal. The problems have been known, like I said, for 25 years. And those charged with the ultimate responsibility have turned a blind eye. They've given lip service to what needs to be done. And especially that's true because they've gotten the money they needed. And that's the real evil. I'll get back to that in just a minute. But in this most recent scandal, as an incentive to administrators, in its infinite wisdom, our government sought to reward administrators with compensatory bonuses if they could get their wait times down and serve people in a more efficient manner. This makes sense, doesn't it? You want to encourage people to do a better job, right? So why not financially reward them? But all these efforts depend on character. It all comes down to character. So what did these nefarious characters do? Well, they wanted their bonuses, but they couldn't make the numbers happen. And here's the other thing. And they didn't want to put their own personal security on the job. This is how corrupt most big government entities are. They didn't want to put their own personal job security on the line by raising the red flag and saying to their superiors, we have a problem here, a real problem. So what did they do instead? They wanted their money, so they cooked the books. Once again, an economic disaster and a personal disaster, all traceable to character. This is the crisis of our time. And we have, as a society, unfortunately, thanks to many people in my profession, I have to say, there was a plethora of pop psychology books in the late 70s and early 80s, all of which spoke to the issue of toxic shame and made shame a bad word. I have to tell you, some shame is not only well-earned, but also well-placed, and can be a decent motivator to get folks to shape up in character. And all I have to say to those nefarious characters who lied and cheated to save their butts and to cover their proverbial butts and keep their jobs and not risk anything and get their bonuses and were willing to cook the books to do it, all I've got to say is shame, shame, shame on you. And when enough of us feel that way, and when enough of us hold one another to account, and when it becomes more the norm again to expect upstanding behavior, we'll get it. We will get it. But we have long ago ceased to even expect it. And we're under this delusion. It is a true delusion. A delusion is a belief that has absolutely no basis whatsoever in objective fact. It's a totally unrealistic belief. We are under this delusion that we can somehow legislate our way out of this problem. We'll come back to that in just a minute when I talk about the horrible tragedy near the UC Santa Barbara campus. But it's utter madness to think that we can restore some sanity to our society and revalue character and therefore encourage and promote character among our people through legislation or through monetary reward, by the way. We're not going to get there that way. We have to take the bull by the horns, so to speak, and confront the problem directly and address it directly. We are all in this together. And we can only start with ourselves. But starting with ourselves provides powerful yeast for the leavening that we need to enrich in our society once again. I don't know how many of you agree with me. If you do, I'd like to hear from you. If you disagree with me, I'd like to hear from you. It's 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'd like to move on a little bit here and talk about the tragedy in Santa Barbara. I posted an article this Friday on my blog at www.manipulative-people.com. The title of the article is A Rare but Potentially Dangerous Personality Disorder. I posted that article not because I'm trying to do some armchair diagnosing. It wouldn't be responsible of me, and nor could I do a firm or fair diagnosis of the young man who committed this horrible act. This young man by the name of Elliot Rodger. But there are enough character issues to go around in this whole tragedy. When I started reading about Rodger's mental health history, I started really getting angry for a lot of reasons. Number one, this is the second time that an autistic spectrum disorder was suspected as a culprit in the tragedies. And there is ample, replete evidence that tells us that there is no direct link between any of the autistic spectrum disorders, including what we used to call Asperger's syndrome. There is no direct link between this and an increased potential for violence. None. Zero. Nada. But yet the papers were full of this information once again, suggesting to folks that that was a major player in this young man's rampage. The second thing I saw that was just ridiculous was the idea that it was misogyny. Now, true, this guy had some really horrific things to say toward the women that he perceived had unfairly treated him and slighted him and prevented him from ending his virginity. But he had plenty of venom for plenty of other people. His pathology went far beyond that. Any misogyny he had was both a companion to and an outgrowth of a much more serious character disturbance. Now, in this young man's case, I mentioned earlier that character disturbances come in two varieties. In some cases, and it's not an all or none thing, that in some cases, the greater contributor to the disturbance is strictly biology. In other cases, it's strictly will. In other words, it's strictly the person's personal preference and decision to hold and retain certain values, principles, attitudes, and develop certain patterns of behavior that are a problem. And to be content with those and to basically think that everything about them is okay and everybody else is all screwed up. This young man, unfortunately, had a little bit of both. And there's evidence, I think, that he probably had a paranoid personality disorder. There's evidence. I'm not going to go on record as saying I've diagnosed him. That would be inappropriate and irresponsible. But I want to read I want to read to you from my blog article these descriptions. Many times I try to take some of the fancy descriptions and labels that we have in the profession and make them a little bit more digestible for folks so that they can fully appreciate some of these more difficult psychological concepts. But this is what I had to say that would describe the core features of someone who has PPD, or paranoid personality disorder. Paranoid personalities exhibit a persistent and pervasive pattern of mistrust of the intentions and motivations of others. Persistent and pervasive, that means it's across the board in a wide range of situations, and it doesn't go away. Paranoid personalities exhibit a persistent and pervasive pattern of mistrust of the intentions and motivations of others. Paranoid personalities are highly sensitive to personal setbacks and perceived slights, rebuffs, and injuries by others. In other words, they are constantly on guard and react instantaneously. They seem to find indications in their environment that somebody is slighting them, rebuffing them, or injuring them in some way, even when they may not be. Paranoid personalities also bear grudges. They harbor resentments, often holding on to them with tenacity and using those grudges and resentments to justify a hostile stance toward others and the world at large. Paranoid personalities can misconstrue even the most neutral or benign events as evidence of ill intention, conspiracies, and a justification to mistrust or lash out. Now, I don't know how many of you read this, but one of the young women that this crazy young man cited as the beginning of his hard feelings toward women barely remembered him and certainly didn't remember any kind of thing that could be construed as an utter rejection or a slight or a ridicule of him. And she felt horrible. But this is the nature of paranoid personalities. They'll misconstrue. The wiring is not right for them. And they're too quick to perceive even neutral or benign events as an evidence of a conspiracy or ill intention, and as a justification to mistrust or to lash out. Paranoid personalities also have an unrealistic and exaggerated sense of self-importance sometimes. They're self-absorbed and unduly self-concerned, and they think of themselves as greater and more powerful and more deserving or more entitled than they have right to. And they therefore can never accept the blame for personal failure. In other words, they never look inward and say, maybe there's something about me that is causing me to have some problems getting along with others, and maybe I should take a look at myself and do something about it. They can't do that. They don't do that. Instead, they think because in their mind they're all that everybody else is all messed up and everybody else has simply been out to get them. Paranoid personalities are often predisposed to aggress in the face of perceived threats to their worth or safety. That's important. They're predisposed to aggress in the face of what they perceive is a threat to their worth or their safety. The paranoid features of this personality type are not merely the result of a true psychosis, but rather part and parcel of their typical way of viewing the world and coping with the world. Now, here's the real core about the paranoid personality. Even though they're not truly delusional and they're not truly crazy most of the time, in other words, they've not lost their capacity to reason and to function, their beliefs border on the delusional, and under stress, they can easily become delusional, truly psychotic, truly mad, truly harboring beliefs with conviction that are totally ridiculous. And if that doesn't describe this young man that committed this heinous act, I don't know what does. Yet, this is not a diagnosis that he had, and he'd been in treatment. He had been getting quote-unquote help of some time since he was 7 years old. I'm going to do a whole program one of these days on how broken our mental health system is. It is so broken. You couldn't possibly break it anymore. And our ability to assess accurately, and by the way, character is at the heart of this problem too. I'm just going to digress for a minute. I know that time is running short already on the program. I can't believe it. Kind of long-winded today. But I wanted to say that character enters into this too. I'll give you a perfect example. Many times people get diagnoses not based on what they really have that ails them, but based on what the treating individual knows that the insurance company will pay for. Sometimes doctors will even diagnose not based on what really is ailing the person, but will best justify the means that they have chosen to treat them. For example, let's say that somebody with a really serious character disturbance and a real tendency toward violent outbursts and abusive behavior is going to get some quote-unquote help for that lack of impulse control by being prescribed some medicines that we know will actually help aid in impulse control. But let's say that medicine just happens to be the medicine that was meant to treat, say, bipolar disorder. Well, for certain reasons, a lot of which has to do with liability, a professional might diagnose the person with bipolar disorder, not just to appropriately diagnose their ailment, but mostly to justify the way they've gone about treating it, which is legitimate, and also provide a diagnosis that will get reimbursed. Now, here's the problem with that. Here's the problem with what appears to be a minor character issue. We compile statistics all the time about, how prevalent certain conditions are and stuff like that. When we go to do studies on how prevalent the disorder is, we don't get a fair, accurate, honest answer. Why? Because people confer the diagnosis when it's not warranted. That's just one example, and I don't want to stay on that. And that's just one example of how our system is broken. Another example of how it's broken, and once again, it all goes back to the character issue. It always goes back to the character issue. Another example is of how broken the system is that when we find somebody like this dangerous young man, and we want to intervene, we want to put him someplace where maybe he can't hurt somebody until he is in a condition to be able to function less dangerously. Well, we've seen to it that we've passed rules with good intentions that make that virtually impossible. That make it virtually impossible for us to actually get these folks the help they need. And that's because we haven't been honest with ourselves, another character issue, about these problems. We have a problem with homelessness. Initially, when the problem first surfaced, it was cast, I can remember this, it was cast as a problem that solely resulted from one president's attempt to reform the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So the PR line, the propaganda out there was that all these people were hitting the streets because they weren't able to get affordable housing. When the fact of the matter is that most of our homeless, now I'm not saying all, and there are exceptions to every case, but most of the homeless people that we have are unfortunately ill. Some of them chronically mentally ill. And they're not an acute and imminent threat to themselves or others, so we can't institutionalize them. And because we depend on their voluntary compliance with outpatient care, and many diseases, unfortunately, are of the nature where the person won't give voluntary compliance. So they're out on the streets. A tragedy rooted in some good intentions, but a real lack of character in confronting honestly the real problems and working toward a more justifiable solution. I might have to do more than one program on our broken mental health system. It makes me sad. I went into this field because I truly wanted to help people change, grow, and especially to help those who were ill be well. Many aspects of our healthcare delivery system and many more aspects of our mental health system are more of an encumberment in that mission than they are an assist. There are more things we've done, I think, in dishonesty and political correctness to make it harder for me to do what I actually set out to do than anything else. And it's a crying shame. Once again, shame, shame, shame on us. A shame on us also for making it so difficult these days to have an honest, unbiased, unpolitically correct, unpolitically charged discussion about the major issues that we face. Shame on us. Shame on us. Where are our guts? Where is our character? Why can't we and why won't we confront the problems that we have head on in an honest and open fashion, without prejudgment and without bringing our political persuasions into the discussion? Truly open, with an open mind, and only a desire to find the truth, and only a desire to really help, and to be sure that we are helping by measuring our outcomes and validating our approaches. Where is that courage and determination? I don't see it anywhere. What I see is a lot of political correctness. I see a lot of preconceived notions. I see a lot of people trumpeting their own particular ideology. And I see a lot of good intentions, but not a heck of a lot of good results. Shame on us. Shame on us. We can do better than that. We must do better than that. If not now, when? Isn't it about time that we face the defining issue of our time? Isn't it about time we got a grip on this character problem? I'm going to continue to do my part. I'm going to continue to write weekly articles. More material should be developed. More books may be developed in the future from my written work and from my articles. I will continue to speak out. I'll continue to develop this program. I'd like it someday to grow and to be even better than it is. I hope it's good. I want it to be better. I want it to be better all the time. And I'd appreciate any suggestions on that score from listeners. Call me anytime. We're on the air, 718-717-8296. I'd be happy to hear your suggestions. Happy to have your input. We're all in this together. But we must, as a country, address our character crisis. Laws won't fix it. Money won't fix it. What will fix it is an honest reckoning. An honest reckoning with ourselves first, and then an honest reckoning with each other. There isn't a problem we have out there that we can't fix. What it takes is the strength and the courage and the willingness to honestly approach those things and to openly approach those things with our heart in the right place toward our own benefit and the benefit of others. That's what character is all about. No preconceived notions, no preconceived agendas, no hidden agendas, no untoward political purpose, no intended backstabbing, but an honest and fair discussion about the issues that plague us. We can solve this. We can do this. That takes character, however. Character that I'm afraid has been sorely lacking for too long. But we're going to do it. And I'm going to keep sounding the trumpet. I'm going to keep sounding the alarm. And every week at this time, we'll revisit the issues. So, I encourage you to be a part of this. I encourage you to provide some input. And I thank you for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of Character Minute.